Greetings, neighbors. This is Reflections, a religious affairs program sponsored by the Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where we, all of us together, do God's work with human hands. My name's Gregory Waldrop. I'm the pastor at Fountain Avenue United Methodist Church, and I'm one of your co-hosts for the Reflection Show. And I'm joined by my co-hosts, Karen Winkle from the United Church of Paducah. Welcome, Karen.
Good to see you, Gregory, and good to have you with us. And so exciting today. We're going to be talking with John Warmack about Christian Science. John's come all the way from Louisville to share with us, and you are
the Committee on Publication for Kentucky.
Which translated, really, you help educate the community.
That's it. We're watching for any positions the public may hold on Christian Science where they may have gotten information that just isn't correct. We'd like to make sure that the correct information is available, and that's the role for the state.
In Paducah, the Christian Science Church is on Joe Clifton,
Mm-hmm.
and I really think that probably most folks drive past and really don't have a sense of the beliefs of Christian Science,
Mm-hmm.
the history, how you might worship, and of course we want to be sure that folks understand that Christian Science is not Scientology.
Right,
So
that's
you're here
a common
to share with us.
misperception,
Yeah.
and I think it's because Scientology has gotten a lot of press of late,
Yeah.
and they are not the same. They don't have any commonality really that I'm aware of. I don't know much about Scientology, but I can tell you that it isn't Christian Science. Christian Science was founded by a woman by the name of Mary Baker Eddy in the 1800s, and she has a very interesting history in that her life almost has two parts. The first part was she grew up, as many young children of that time would have grown up, in a family that read the Bible, very much a church-going family. And the Bible was the entertainment sometimes in the evening. There wasn't anything to distract with it.
Right.
And the families would read the Bible together. And one of the things that reportedly that she pondered was if these healings were taking place that she heard about through the Gospels, why couldn't they take place now? After all, Jesus said, those that believe on me, the things that I do, ye shall do,
Yeah,
and greater.
things.
And so she... that kind of was a seed way early in her life. Now, her life was not rosy. She wasn't particularly well. She was sickly, in fact, and the letters between Mrs. Eddy and her siblings at that time show that they were worried about her. She was frail, you might say. And so just a long history of health issues, some very unfortunate marital problems. Often she was trying to figure out where her next meal might come from, or certainly financial issues along the way. And she was a writer, and at that time, for a woman to be a writer, that wasn't common. There were a few famous ones that we've heard about, but generally speaking, that was a little unusual to be on the forefront. And she wasn't. She wrote, but she wasn't someone that was commonly known as a writer, and yet was trying to just eke out a living, like so many people. And I think the moment that kind of changed, as I mentioned, there were two parts to her life, and the moment that changed and started a new part was when she had an accident that rendered her nearly to the point of death. Her friends, I think, would have said that they thought she was going to pass on, and certainly the attending physician thought that. And she went back, she asked for her Bible, and she was reading the Gospels again, and she went back to that same question she had from when she was a child. And if this healing could occur back then, why can't it now? Again, he said we could. Yeah. And through the study of some of those healings, she actually herself was healed.
As an adult.
As an adult. She was about 45 at that time. So this was about midway through her life. And she, at that point, as she says, wanted to find out a positive rule for how that happened. It's almost as though you could imagine if you were working a nasty math problem and you suddenly got the answer, you'd want to be, or the Rubik's Cube, we all grew up, seeing that, and if you got it by accident, you'd want to find out, well, how did that happen? And you'd want to do it again and again. And so she spent the next many years, but in earnest, the next probably 3 years, trying to sort that out, trying to find out what was it? What happened? How did it happen? And she discovered that she could do this regularly. She could heal herself regularly. And then she discovered she could heal others through what she found to be the positive rule, or the method that worked. Now, it's not, it's not a magic pill, and it's not something that is mysterious really to anyone if you think about it. She simply was going back to the way Jesus viewed mankind, and that was as the children of God. And if God is all and God is good and we are His children, there's not a place for what appears to be this discord. And so she sorted that back to, well, if we really see that, like Jesus saw it, healing would occur. And she found that's what happened, and she began to heal others. And then folks heard about it and wanted to learn how to heal themselves, and then that's where it went. And she didn't intend to start a religion. That was not the goal. She just simply was trying to sort out something she saw and answer a question really she had from youth. And that's really the beginnings of Christian Science.
How does that translate into the weekly work of the Christian Scientist
Today?
Faith, yeah,
Well,
worship and
that's a
holy
great
habits, all
question,
that
and
sort of thing.
it was it wasn't a deliberate let's start a church exercise. In fact, she thought that many of the other churches would see this and grab hold of it, and because to her it was one of those obvious moments. It made great sense to her. And she found some of them did, and many ministers and pastors became Christian Scientists at that time, but it didn't grab hold in the churches themselves. And so she, at that point, thought, well, to protect this, we need to have some structure where people can learn about it and really grow to understand what it's about. And it started with a normal service where you had someone giving a sermon, and at the beginning it was her. She would give a sermon, and she was very good at it, and it attracted a lot of folks. What she found was that wasn't always the case necessarily when others were up on the pulpit. And so at some point along the way, she changed the structure, and we don't have a preacher. We don't have a sermon as you would expect. We have a sermon, but it's not as you would normally see in a church. Our lesson is a published lesson that includes citations from the Bible. So Bible, scriptural citations, similar to as you would have on just about any Christian church, supplemented and elaborated on by citations from her book, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. She wrote this book as kind of an unlocking of the Scriptures and what she saw, trying to illustrate what she saw. And those two complementary statements each week make up the sermon. And so I can study the sermon all week. Everyone in the world studying the same sermon every single week.
And it's got the same repetition, routine.
It
repeats itself.
I think just to give you an illustration of it, we have a published quarterly each week. Now this happens to be what we call the full text quarterly, meaning that if I open it up, the full text is there. It's for lazy people like me. Now, back in the old days, when I was growing up and my mother was teaching me how to approach this, it would just simply be the citations, and I would get the Bible and I'd get the Science and Health and look them up. This is much easier, and so I tend to do it. And so I think it's wonderful. We study this all week, so this is my Bible lesson, but it's my Bible lesson during the week. Now on Sunday, this lesson is read by two lay readers in the church. One reads the Bible, one reads the Science and Health, and it is this same lesson. So in a sense, it's almost like you're studying, a classroom setting. You would study all week, and then there'd be the lecture. It's kind of like that. And it's interesting because you see something completely different every day because you're applying what you're reading from the Bible to that day's needs. Exactly, and of course Sunday's completely different. It tends to be an eye-opening experience for many. And that's the Sunday format. Now Wednesdays we have a testimony meeting, and it is made up again of readings from the Bible and from Science and Health, but those citations are selected by the reader, and it's one of the two readers on Sunday, which we call the first reader, reads on Wednesdays and selects those citations, and that takes about roughly half of the meeting time, which is an hour. The remaining meeting time is devoted to testimonies from individuals in the congregation. Maybe they're members of that church, maybe they're not. They may be traveling through, or they're attendees who are contemplating membership. And they will just stand up and say, I have been working through this, and this is what came to me, and this is how it's been resolved. And it's really a great meeting, because you get, you might be working and struggling through something, and you hear how someone else has handled that. Now that is Sunday and Wednesday. We also have a Thanksgiving service. We just had one, and that's, to be completely honest, my favorite service. It's kind of a combination of the two. The readings are published in the quarterly, and a portion of that service is devoted to testimonies, but they tend to be much more an annual kind of, I'm grateful for this year's unfoldment and so forth. It's very inspiring. And then we read the President's Proclamation, which is always an inspiring thing, because it gets us back to the roots of our country. And it's like, as I said, that's my favorite. Of course, it's my favorite holiday, so it's not unlikely I would enjoy that one.
Well, we also know in Paducah on Broadway there is a reading room.
Right.
And that's a part of the
Yes.
common...
It is part bookstore, part study room. It is a location where you could come and ask questions, although it's not there's not a counseling function and so forth. It really is just a quiet place. A lot of folks will use that in the middle of the day to go and just get away from it, get away from their work and study, and it is just full of resources, different Bible translations. We have a number of periodicals, the Christian Science Journal, which is a monthly magazine, Christian Science Sentinel, which is a weekly magazine, and there are bound volumes of those that stretch all the way back to the early 1900s, and I think that there's just a ton of information there, and that's the reading. That probably is one of the questions that we get a lot, is what goes on in the reading room. It's nothing unusual. It's like a bookstore in a sense, study room.
Talk a little bit more about some of the key beliefs of Christian Science.
Okay.
You've shared a little bit about that, but tell us more.
Okay. I would say, again, it's founded on the concept from the Bible. If you take the first chapter of Genesis, for example, and the first few verses of the second chapter, you understand that we were created in God's image and likeness. Now, there are two ways that could happen. He could either be a lot like us, or we could be a lot like him. And that's kind of maybe a divide in the road. And the second chapter makes it sound a little more like he might be like us a little bit. But it also starts to materialize man in a sense, the rib and so forth. The first chapter really is a spiritual view of creation. And if you stay focused on that spiritual view, and you stay focused on the concept that man is made in God's image and likeness, and that what appears to the contrary is much like, darkness doesn't have a lot of substance, but if you turn off the light, it seems real. And changing from darkness to light is simply turning that light on. And you find that the light is the thing that has the substance. The darkness was the void of it. Well, in a sense, that sounds, it's a funny way to say the same thing, but what we see as erroneous circumstances, whether it be financial, whether it be health, relationship, there's some sense there that perhaps we're not seeing clearly our relationship with God in our true being. And that's I think what was so key about what Mrs. Eddy saw, is that she saw the effective application of that healed. Now, that sounds great, and it sounds like that would be wonderful for someone else until it happens to you, and then you realize, well, there's something to it. And I've had, just to give a good illustration of that, I've had health problems resolved. What tends to be in my case where I really do a lot of prayerful work is in the area of business issues and so forth. And one of those moments that you point back to in your life, for me, was when I had just started my architectural practice, and some of you might know how that works, but basically you get a project, you do the project, that takes some time, you bill for it, then you wait to get paid. So there's this lengthy process that it could be 3 months before the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Well, when you're starting a young practice with a young family, that could be critical. And in my experience, I came to one of those critical moments where you have columns: work in place, work underway, new jobs, things I'm waiting on being paid for. Well, all the columns were empty, and nothing was coming in, nothing was expected to come in, and we were at the point of, are we going to make our house payment? And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Now, there are a lot of ways I could go. I could have gone back to a job and given up my architectural practice, but I decided to, after some gnashing of teeth, I should say, I decided to pray about this and really try to use this opportunity, this example as an opportunity to raise my understanding of my relationship to God higher. After all that, it's almost like a story problem in math. We all hated those when we were going through school, but those are the things that really made us understand math.
Right.
Putting math problems on a chart, eventually got pretty good at that. And then they gave you the dreaded math story problem. This was a story problem about my understanding of God and my relationship to Him. So I remember sitting in our family room, and I was listening to some hymns that were on our CD, and I was in tears, to be completely honest with you. It was a very, very tough time because I didn't know what was going to happen next. In my entire life, I had been cared for, but for some reason I was losing sight of that bigger picture. And then it dawned on me that there would be a conclusion to this, and I just needed to be receptive to it. I needed to really listen to what God was trying to tell me. And what came to me was the story where the disciples came to Jesus, and the tax man wanted to be paid, and he said, go get it from the fish's mouth. Well, I've read that, and it was not, he didn't mean, that's fine, and I just kept on. But it hit me this time. They were fishermen, and he was speaking in a language they would understand as fishermen. And if you're a fisherman, the process is you get a boat, you go out, you catch the fish, you bring them in, you clean them, you sell them. It's a process. It isn't immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, it meant I didn't have to really be burdened by this 3-month process that I was so impressed about. And that maybe there was another way this could occur. It hadn't occurred to me up to that point that there was another solution other than the normal process. So at that point, I completely opened my thought to some new approach. And I got a call the next day from a brand new client who was leaving town. He needed some work done on his house, a small project. And could I meet with him right away? And I said, well, let me check my calendar. And of course, I could meet with him right away. And I did. And we went over the project, and I accepted the project. And he said, well, could I just go ahead and pay you? Which was shocking. And I said, yeah, that'd be fine. He said, could I pay you in cash? I didn't even have to go to the bank. I mean, this was eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
And when you see something like that is a result of prayer and a result of truly understanding to a higher degree your relationship with our Father, it changes you. It changes you, and you no longer have that same basis of fear, of uncertainty. So that's just a quick understanding. We've had in our family physical healings that have been just as remarkable, and they grow out of a new and enriched view of our relationship with God, and that's really what we're after. So.
It's focus on those healing. You understand, and does the Christian Scientists generally understand it coming out of enlightenment? Does it come out of, do you lay hands on people and pray for people? Is it a conversation, a conferring with people that health comes from?
It is not laying on hands. It is not, it isn't necessarily coming from conversation. It is somewhat enlightenment, but I wouldn't say it's the bright light type of enlightenment. it is a growing understanding of your relationship with God. In a sense, if there was an underlying harbored fear or an underlying harbored misunderstanding, and in my case with this illustration of the business situation, it was the idea that I'm out there by myself having to do this for my family. Well, I'm not. God is leading me as long as I get out of the way. And it is an enlightenment in a sense, but it's incremental, not necessarily a quantum leap in every case. And I think that it's growth. I mean, we're looking for spiritual growth constantly, and I think that's the key. It might help folks to look at a website called spirituality.com, which is, and I mention that one because it's easy to remember, www.spirituality.com. And there are accounts, there are chats where people talk about, I'm working through this, and there'll be some conversations. There will be sometimes themed conversations about a particular subject, but it's searchable, and you can find inspiration from others' experiences, plus references to science and health, the Bible, other writings of Mary Baker Eddy. And then if those that would really like to know more about Mary Baker Eddy, there is a website that is just chock full of information called the Mary Baker Eddy Library.org in this case. So Mary Baker Eddy Library.org. And both of those are great resources to help with some of the questions you've asked and to give more.
Let me ask just one more question.
Sure.
And that is for you to clarify the Christian Scientist relationship with the medical community as well.
Well, it isn't one of animosity in any sort or any kind of opposition. It's almost as though, if you knew something worked well, you would go to it and rely. And I'd say that summarizes a Christian Scientist's approach to medical issues. Now, the church in no way says thou shalt not do whatever. Yeah. It isn't that at all. And it is left to the individual and where they are in their understanding. It's so interesting, having been a Christian Scientist for essentially all of my life, all of it that I'm well aware of. It is just so natural for me to immediately resort to prayer for everything. And it's interesting when I've had friends who have been struggling with things and they are going to the doctor, maybe they're in the hospital. My immediate reaction is, gosh, I sure wish I could tell them all about this. And in some cases that's appropriate, in some cases it's not. You don't really want to interfere with someone's own experience unless there's receptivity there. But on the other hand, that's the immediate reaction. Well, I know this is the best way for me to approach these issues. And I think that would be what most Christian Scientists would say. Not that others are doing the wrong thing, but simply that there are other ways to go about it, and this one has proven to be effective for generations. My wife, I think, is third or fourth generation, and that's not unusual. And it's just because there's such a reliance based upon experience. You naturally go to the things that you know work, and in this case, this works. Very, very effective.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you brought some things with you, and I want to be sure that we have time for that.
I wanted to give you both something for Christmas.
Oh, lovely.
And Mrs. Eddy has, there were a couple things, and I couldn't decide, and so I decided to give you both, just to settle the dispute in my thought. And one is a book called Christ and Christmas. It's available in the reading room, and it's just a poem. It's very short. You'll read it in about 10 minutes at the most, even if you really ponder it. But it's beautiful, and it's something great for this season. And the other one will take you a little longer, and it's a compilation of writings by Mary Baker Eddy about Christian Science. About Christmas specifically, and it's entitled "What Christmas Means to Me," and other Christmas messages. So, like for both of you to have these and enjoy them for the Christmas season. And
that's lovely.
I think
you're so sweet.
Well, you all are so gracious to have me come. I appreciate that, and I think that, again, we just want people to know what's true about Christian Science, and there are plenty of resources to find the information. Don't just Google it; you'll get all kinds of strange things.
Oh yeah, right.
So give us those websites again that you would recommend for our viewers who might be interested in learning more.
I would say www.spirituality.com, and that is a general spirituality conversation in a sense, and you will find Christian scientists and those that aren't Christian scientists, but it generally is going to be a Christian Science conversation. Then there's www.marybakereddy, E-D-D-Y, library.org in this case. So marybakereddylibrary.org. And then a third one that I didn't mention earlier is the church website, our mother church in Boston. And that is the initials that stand for the church. So it's www.tfccs.com, which is the First Church Christ Scientist.com. So tfcss.com, tfccs.com. So, and I think there are some links from the other one. So since that one was a little harder.
Here in this region, of course, is the reading room in Paducah on
Right.
Broadway,
Right.
downtown.
The Guthrie building, I
Yeah, in the
believe.
Guthrie building, and a very central place,
Right.
and the actual church facility, which is on 28th Street.
Right.
And the history of the church here, do you have just a
I
little
don't know.
sense of that?
I don't have a good sense of that. I
Yeah.
know it's been here for a good long time.
Pretty substantial. It's in a place with
right. It's in a great location.
Yeah.
And I think the reading room is open, I believe, Tuesdays through Thursdays from 10 to 2. And the folks there would be glad to answer any questions. And of course, the church services on Sunday and Wednesday. I think they have on their sign the times of the
They
services.
do.
They
And
do.
and they're in the phone book. The reading
Right,
room is in the
right,
phone book, and folks are most gracious. And there's an answering machine if
they miss
someone
right.
needs to leave a message.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you, and thank you in particular for making the trek from Louisville.
Well, I've grown to
That's
love that trip, so it's a pleasure.
Yeah,
It really is. It's a
yeah.
beautiful trip. So
such a
Thank you.
marvelous thing to have you with us and to share your gift. And I.
Yeah.
This is a first. We haven't received gifts.
Well, it's Christmas.
yeah,
It's just
that's a
appropriate. I
beautiful
expect
thing.
book reports, though.
Hey,
Okay.
no problem.
Okay.
In triplicate.
All right.
All right.
We are glad to get to know our neighbors
Good.
in the Christian Scientist Church here in this region.
Yeah, marvelous.
Glad for what you do and for the church's presence with
Well,
us.
thank you for what you do in bringing this about. It's wonderful.
And we're very glad you've been with us again for the Reflections program from Paducah Cooperative Ministry. And we encourage you, wherever you are, to do God's work with human hands. See you next time.
Shalom.